Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones is a type of computer RPG that doesn't come along very often. It's a cRPG that is heavily focused on the actual role-playing aspect in terms of conflict resolution. It is one of those very few computer RPGs in which straight-up combat is to be avoided, not only because it is rather lethal and a slightly bit clunky, but more so because of the lasting psychological effects that it will have on your character. So, if that got your interest, buckle up and join me on this sanity-grinding adventure into the Cthulhu mythos. If this is the first time on my channel, welcome. I am Steven Nonsense, geek culture analyst, Lovecraftian extraordinaire. I bring you RPG, strategy, and city builder reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy what follows. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back, and remember to click that bell button, it really helps a lot. Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones is an attempt, a pretty solid one to be honest, at translating the Call of Cthulhu tabletop RPG to our computer screens. And while that is pretty cool in and of itself, I feel I need to make some clarifications relating to the type of computer RPG experience that the game offers. While reading through the various forum posts about the game's quest and whatnot, I'll tell you why I did that in a bit, I encountered several posts from gamers whose expectations were quite different than what they encountered. A more traditional computer RPG experience of becoming a walking god through grinding XP and currency. Stygian is definitely not that. The tabletop RPG is much less rolling of dice to see who hits better and more rolling of dice to see who gets the least insane during a session. The average Call of Cthulhu session ends with the entire party dead or mad and the world consumed by cosmic horrors. Just so I'm clear, Stygian is not about winning, it's about enduring and barely surviving, hopefully with some of your sanity still left so that you can actually understand what's still happening around you. Stygian isn't about saving the world, it's only about saving yourself, in a manner of speaking. The game and setting isn't just inspired by the Cthulhu mythos, it is populated by characters and locations plucked straight from Lovecraft's stories, and as such, those who have read at least some of them will get that much extra bit of enjoyment from the proceedings, while everyone else might be intrigued enough to start their own studies into his forbidden tomes. A cataclysmic event happened some time back, a black day, during which some citizens disappeared, many died, buildings were destroyed, and now the town of Arkham and its surroundings is separated from the rest of the world, situated under an alien sky in a perpetual dusk, surrounded by dark creatures, spirits, and under the physical rule of the mob, the psychological rule of a cult, and the psychic stress of the old ones. Those left are mostly insane or perpetually depressed and addicted to some form of mind-altering substance. And since there is no contact with the rest of the world, money doesn't mean anything anymore and the currency is cigarettes, which is a really nice touch and illustrates very well the type of thing that people truly value when Cthulhu comes to shove. This is the world you'll have to navigate on your quest to find a mysterious faceless person who appears in your dreams and teases you with maybe offering some answers to what and how it happened, even if not so much why. But living in this damned world is hard enough. Delving deeper into its intrigues will have you constantly facing horrors that will affect your sanity almost as much as it will affect your health, and the psychological scars of these encounters will leave lasting marks on your character. When you level up, you will be able to improve your character's stats and get a positive ability. This is very much in line with most traditional RPG systems, however, Stygian adds a wrinkle to it. There is a separate angst meter, which works similarly to the XP meter. It starts filling up after each combat encounter, and when you level up your angst, your character gets a negative trait. You cannot decrease angst in any sort of way, it will just constantly pile up the more you get into fights. So this is why it's best to avoid fights when possible. Add to this that your character can get addicted to any number of mind-altering substances that are super available pretty much everywhere, and adventuring with low levels of sanity can and will lead to developing much deeper problems. You'll have to walk a relatively thin line and expect to lose some attempts to any of the upper mentioned obstacles. There are several ways of recovering health and sanity though, some of them involving using drugs, some using a character's medicine skill, and some of them involve reading or the services of a prostitute. The game also has a research and crafting system. You can research science, medicine, or various occult subjects while your party is resting. In order to craft things, you will generally need a specialized work table, but you can also buy various kits that will help you craft things on the go. All of this happens at some point in the 1920s and is illustrated using a 2D hand-drawn style that is somewhat reminiscent of illustrations from that time period. It is very eerily appropriate to the proceedings. Since combat is to be avoided, the dialogue options tend to be quite varied and depend a lot both on your sanity as well as your skills and belief system. Very cool indeed. One of your best ways of regaining sanity being to interpret things in a way that fits with your character's personal philosophy. That being said, some quests tend to be a one try and you're dead affair, so you can only fail it once, the second time resulting either in a fight or a new straight up dying. There are several ways of solving all of the quests depending on your particular character. These are generally through the use of stealth, the occult, sheer force, and some of them through dialogue options. But this is also why I was looking through the forums, because I couldn't finish a plot critical quest. I had used an ingredient that was obtained through this quest line, formaldehyde, for something other than the quest, and well, at the time of me recording this, you can't make any more formaldehyde than the 2 you make during the quest, so I'm hoping they patch the game with a fix of sorts. Suffice to say, temporary pro tip, once you've made the formaldehyde, make sure to use it only for the quest it is required for. Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones is pretty good, and I think you can tell from how I'm talking about it that I dig it. But it could do with a bit more polish, both from a game design point of view as well as from a technical one. One of the issues I just mentioned, a game critical quest that cannot be completed if you're not paying attention. I get that the game is meant to be tough and you should expect succumbing to addictions or insanity, but you shouldn't have to restart the game because of an insufficiently tested quest or some design aspect being overlooked. I also dismissed one of my companions, and even though he said that I'll be able to find him somewhere in town afterwards, I never saw him again. Character movement is sometimes a bit weird, with your character starting to moonwalk, and there are several issues when it comes to you interacting with things in the world, especially with entryways. Combat is turn-based on a hex grid, and generally it's okay, but even here there are sometimes issues with the cursor not changing, but clicking on your target will still work. One major gameplay aspect of combat in this game is that you don't have to kill all your enemies in order to succeed. You can always retreat, but at the expense of gaining angst and not XP however. You will always gain angst when exiting combat regardless of the result. But at a certain point in any encounter, different exit hexes will light up behind the enemy line, which will allow you to exit the encounter with full XP as well as the angst. This opportunity should always be taken, seeing as how you could be sparing your characters further health or sanity damage. Also, if you escape with your character first, you escape with the entire party. Doing it otherwise, you will retreat them individually. The whole gaining angst when fighting aspect is a really nice touch, but I also think it could have done with a little bit more nuance. For instance, if you've just dealt with an encounter with ghouls, which is a pretty pants-shitting experience and makes sense to have an angst cost, but if you survive it, then encountering some deranged humans can't really mark up as high on your weird shitometer in terms of angst, because you just survived a bunch of ghouls, so I think that mechanic could do with a little bit more nuancing. I mentioned a little bit about the game's art style earlier, but I feel I need to talk about how well it manages to build its horror-esque atmosphere. The visuals are definitely one major part of it, both in terms of the use of dark, earthy colors as well as some of the things that you'll be a witness to and the general dirty dinginess of the world. When you're in the gloomy streets of Arkham, it sounds as if you're in a drafty tunnel, and each place you go into is a bit of a respite from the mental pressure of constantly hearing whooshing air. But even when you enter one of the many buildings in the city, the deep sense of murky atmosphere doesn't leave you, with each of them having their own particular music and ambient sounds, building each place's character accordingly. In conclusion, Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones is a very solid role-playing experience set in a consistently dark and unsettling world, which you will most likely want to replay with different types of characters to experience the game from a different philosophical perspective and a different approach. It is a clear must play for fans of Lovecraft and gamers who really love role-playing in games, as well as those who are only tangentially familiar with the Cthulhu mythos. it definitely gets my nonsense seal of approval. But I'm curious to know what you think about the game. Does it tickle your tentacles? Thank you very much for watching. I've been Steven Nonsense, and see you next time.